Hello everybody, welcome to a new encounter. Today we are going to continue with our series on the history of Islam and the development of Islamic thought, and we are going to discuss the topic of Ijtihad. What is Ijtihad? What is the relation between Ijtihad and revelation? And we have to emphasize the importance of the application, understanding of the text according to Ijtihad. Ijtihad is simply, in this case, the exercise of autonomous human reason to the text of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. It is clear that the Quran speaks about many things, but the Quran is not specific in all detail that we encounter in our lives. That is why we have scholars in Islam. That is why we have ulama. That's why we have judges. That's why we have jurists who are experts in the application of the law. And the Quran speaks in broader terms, but in certain specific things, especially today in the modern world, where so many things have changed throughout history, then scholars must be able to apply human reasoning to be able to apply the law in the specific context for a specific problem for a specific person, because you cannot judge every situation in the life of a Muslim in general. When someone comes in front of a judge, each judge according to the context, and then the laws are applied. Therefore, you need reason, human reasoning, and you have to know how to apply the law in this case. What the text says, what the Quran says, what the Sunnah says, and what if there is nothing written in the Quran and the Sunnah about this case? That's why the training that the judges, that the experts, the scholars of Islam, they must have such a ijtihad, which is human reasoning, to be able to know how to apply the law in this case specifically. And like I said, even we have an example recorded in the tradition. It is said that one time when the Prophet wanted to send one of his companions, a messenger, to Yemen, and he decided to send Mu'adh ibn Jabal. And before he sent him, he asked him, how will you judge there? I mean, the Prophet is not there. He's sending a messenger there as a representative of him, and the Prophet asked him, how will you judge? Mu'adh replied, I will judge according to what is written in the book, in the Quran. So the Prophet said to him, well, what if it's not written in the book? Mu'adh replied, I will judge according to the Sunnah of the Prophet. And then the Prophet replied also, what if the case is neither in the Sunnah of the Prophet? And then Mu'adh replied with confidence, then I will strive to form an opinion. Meaning his own opinion, judging according to the knowledge of the Quran in the Sunnah. And then the Prophet replied, thanking God, because he was happy because of the messenger of the Prophet, meaning Mu'adh as a messenger sent by the messenger of God, to be able to judge accordingly to this community that was forming in Yemen. And this is the same case in today's world and throughout history, because we are seeing that even at the time of the Prophet, even in Arabia, there were situations in which certain cases there was no let's say background, something new that came up, and the scholars had to form an opinion about this specific case and must be able to judge, always preserving the message of the Quran and the Sunnah and what is known from tradition. And when there is nothing written down, then the scholars, they must be able to arrive to a conclusion by comparative analysis. They have to look into the scripture, the text, and look for a similar situation and how that situation was judged, and how can you apply that knowledge in that situation, and how that could be related to this specific case that they are judging specifically now. And then by this comparative analysis, human reasoning is important. That's why scholars are trained also in logic. And this is the meaning of the term ijtihad and the importance of this term. As one famous professor of Islam, Islamic scholar, defined it the following way, and I will quote. He said that in legal terms, Ijtihad is best defined as the individual or collective effort of scholars and jurists to produce a specific, new and creative legal opinion that respects the meaning of the message. And this is also what we call a fatwa. A fatwa is simply a legal opinion of a scholar. It's not a law, but it's the legal opinion of a scholar and the school that he represents, his community. And this is how they produce fatwas for specific communities. And sometimes the fatwa of big scholar is respected in many countries even. But we have to, this is the application of this term, human reasoning. And someone who has not such training cannot really be, let's say, to be a scholar is not that simple. You need a lot of training, a lot of preparation, and you have to be an expert in many fields. Not only in Quran and Hadith, you have to be trained in many other, in history, you have to know psychology, you have to know also many aspects of culture, the specific community, time, place, history, because like I said, to be able to produce a fatwa is also according to the context, the history, the region, and throughout time, scholars must be able to apply the knowledge of the Quran and Hadith according to the time in which they are living and the specific situation that they are judging. That's why without human reasoning, we can say that there's not really a good application of neither of the law, neither of the message. Because if you don't know how to apply and transform that message specifically for a person or the case that you are judging, then it's really impossible to apply correctly the revelation in the life of a person, or in this case a specific Muslim or specific case. It depends, and it changes according to the context, according to the scholar also, because sometimes scholars could have different opinions. One scholar could say something and another scholar could say something else, and someone could say, well, who is right and who is wrong? It looks like they are maybe fighting in contradiction, but no. Someone who thinks like this is having a wrong thinking, because it's true that there are different scholars, they could have different opinions, they might disagree, and maybe they are against each other in the way they apply certain law, but that doesn't mean that they are wrong. It's like, for example, a doctor, there's a patient, has a certain disease, certain problem, and different doctors could prescribe different medications for the same disease to this patient. Now, how could it be that different doctors prescribe different things? Because they are different treatments for this specific problem, and the doctor simply choose one way and another doctor choose another way, but both ways are okay. Meaning, it's just a matter of opinion. That's why there are different schools in Islam, different schools of thought, different ways that the scholars approach things. And even though there might be disagreements, no one is in the right to judge us or say that, oh, this community is wrong, and attack this community or this way of applying things. And that's not for people's decision to judge anyone else. Each community accepts and takes upon themselves the rulings of different scholars, different ulamas, and this applies for this community. And another community follows different fatwas or different interpretations according to their own scholars. Syrian scholars, you have Egyptian scholars, and in general there is a general consensus of things, because everything at the end is within the framework of Islam. And of course this is a deep topic, because of course then within Islam, not only within the Sunni tradition, you have also the Shia tradition, and they also apply their own ways of interpretation of Islam, and each community follows their own scholars. And at the end, like the Quran says, God is the judge. So, as always, I want to thank you so much for your attention. In the next video, we are going to continue with more on different topics. As you can see, Islamic studies are not that simple. You need to study a lot and know how to, like in my case as a professor, to explain this for the common person who's watching this video to be able to understand. And as I always emphasize, I'm speaking here as a professor for whoever watches these videos. For Muslim, non-Muslim, atheist, whoever watches this video, because as a professor, as a historian, our job is to explain, not to judge what is right or what is wrong or this or that. That concerns more for the believer, or for my own personal belief. Okay, that's my personal view. But as a professor, we simply explain. We simply explain the history, we simply explain the thought, the teachings, what the different schools say. But in matters of belief, that matters concern to the scholars, to the imams, to the religious community. We, as professors of, in this case, scholars, even in this specific field of Islamic studies, our job is simply to explain the history and to explain the context, either of, in this case, the let's say legal thoughts or application of laws, could be philosophy, many other topics, history, and many more. As always, thank you so much for your attention, and God willing, we are going to continue with more in the next videos. Thank you so much, and see you next time.